In every cat and mouse game worth its salt, it doesn't depend whether the cat is winning or the mouse is winning. It's all about the chase. But what if the chase has its fair share of problems? Welcome and welcome to Cinema Express. This is Avinash Ramachandran, and in this video review episode, we are going to look at director Praveen's Aaryan, starring Vishnu Vishal, Selvaraghavan, Shraddha, Srinath, Manasa Chowdhury, and a bunch of other actors. It's not easy for me to talk about this film without giving a few spoilers, so as always, spoiler alert. Aryan is Vishnu Vishal's return to the investigative thriller space. So of course there will be comparisons to Ratchasan, and I don't think it's fair to do that because they are completely two different films, both in terms of intrigue and the kind of premise and the kind of case it involves itself into. So let's openly say that Aryan is not Ratchasan, but there are also other reasons why Aryan is not Ratchasan. You are hooked into the film right in the first 15 odd minutes because it's a very new way of showing a serial killer film. See, the fact that Selvaraghavan plays this stoic person who has sinister motives, who leads this mundane life, who does a lot of regular things, and yet he says that he is a writer and written books like Crimson Sky and with heavy words like these, and then he wants to, let's say, create a masterpiece that will treat him in a way that exalts him to a level of, let's say, a Jeffrey Archer or the big writers of this genre, and he feels that his creativity is not being respected enough, so he gets on a serial killing spree. Because of his creativity or the research he has done, he has got enough material to understand how to get out of the legal system and the loopholes that covers the system. Everything is good, the premise is set, you have an interesting idea where the serial killer tells the world what he is going to do and what are the police going to do after knowing all this information. This idea is fantastic. I was completely intrigued as to how these two worlds are going to collide. The police procedural where the police know everything yet cannot do anything, and the serial killer part of it where he cannot do anything but still he does a lot of things. The fact that who is going to be killed is the big question is a fascinating idea. We have seen it in a few other films where you don't know who the murderer is and who the victim will be. But here you kind of know who the murderer is, and the victim has a particular identity of sorts which is revealed in a very, very laborious ending. Let's not go there for now. Let's talk about how the film reaches to that point where you get to idea why the serial killer is killing people. The idea itself has, I don't know, should I call it merit or should I call it whim or should I call it something that is out of the ordinary? See, it is very interesting, it is very novel, but it is not told in a way that is entertaining. It is not told in a way that is intriguing. I didn't really care about how this particular narrative, this particular investigation reached a particular point, and they have to show the villain to be this completely very, very skillful person. Like, can he write? Yes. Can he think out of the ordinary? Yes. Is he a electronic expert? Yes. Is he a hacking expert? Yes. Is he someone who knows the digital media? Yes. Does he know how to hack into major television channels? Yes. Major phone networks? Yes. So it's like he's too powerful a person that the police remain spectators, the audience remains spectators. There is no real stakes, mainly because he's really too big, and the person standing opposite him is the cop played by Vishnu Vishal, who unfortunately doesn't get to do a lot, both as an actor and as the character, because Vishnu Vishal's character named Arian Nambi does is react to situations. He doesn't have enough time to solve the case. He has to resort to a lot of gadgets that is not in his hands, and he has to suddenly out of nowhere find someone who can create an AI software that figures out a lot of things. See, a lot of things are crammed into this narrative that every way that the police find to reach the serial killer is very, very, how do I say it, very whimsical. See, a police procedural cannot be whimsical. It cannot be without logic. It cannot be without an idea of rootedness. As in, again, I know it's wrong to compare both films, but let's just take, for example, Ratchasan. When the police is going to investigate what's going to happen, it actually shows them going to each house, going to talk to a lot of people. It's a proper investigation that you see. But unfortunately, in Aryan, that never happens. Everything is given to them on a platter. Everything is given to them by the serial killer himself. And so when these pieces are also placed by the serial killer and the police are just playing catch up, and the hero is just there at the right time to do the right things that has already been almost predestined, it makes the film lose a lot of credibility, mainly because you do not have the interest to watch a film where the police aren't really winning and the villain isn't really your, let's say, the uber cool villain that you want to aspire to. So, considering the villain is not aspirational, the hero isn't aspirational, what is left is the investigation part of it, and when that doesn't work, Aryan loses a lot. It also has a problem with the characters that are not Selvaraghavan, as in there is a character played by Shraddha Srinath and a character played by Manasa Chowdhury. Both of them don't really do much rather than just serve the purpose of pushing the scenes forward. They are there in very, very oddly placed sequences. There is one where Vishnu Vishal's character and Shraddha Srinath's character have a conversation about who Selvaraghavan's character really is. It's a conversation that happens in such a wrong place that it feels so unintentionally funny. The film never really elevates itself. It remains very, very straightforward. It remains on a very straight line, even though it has a very non-linear kind of an edit. Selvaraghavan's character named Azhagar Narayanan holds the film together, and it's a very interesting film as long as it is based on him. I would want to know more about how this writer turns into a serial killer, how this writer went about all the painstaking efforts to understand each and every one of his victims and why he does what he does. So the idea of what Selvaraghavan does is much, much more interesting than what the hero does, and I think that is a big problem that Aryan faces. Also, there's a particular scene where there is a bomb blast, and then they show how Selvaraghavan orchestrated that, and after that video, Selvaraghavan looks at the camera and does this. So there's such a very, very funny scene, as an intentionally funny one, intentionally that shows that the character has its own set of idiosyncrasies. I would have loved to see more of that. Somewhere, Aryan had this wonderful idea, but it had to include unnecessary heroism for Vishnu Vishal's character. We have seen him do better than this. What happens here is he has a fight or two in between. He has a romantic sequence. He has a song that goes nowhere. Every time this film goes into an interesting territory, the film somehow finds a way to come back to the ground, and that is probably why I couldn't really gel with the idea of Aryan. Because see, every single time the film tells me that here there's a wonderful idea, here there's an idea where we are pushing the boundaries of a serial killer genre. We are trying to subvert the stereotype. We're trying to subvert the idea of what it takes to be a killer, what it takes to finding a killer, and we are going to play around with the idea. And then you are dangling that carrot in front of me and suddenly making me see a very, very ordinary film that has the very, very same beats as a template serial killer film. So this confusion doesn't augur well for Aryan. And on the performances side, I quite enjoyed watching Selvaraghavan, but I can't say the same about other characters, mainly because those characters are not fleshed out. We saw what Vishnu Vishal could do in a police role, and somehow he feels a very pale shadow of himself because the writing doesn't support his character to do much more than just react. His character doesn't do much more than standing in front of his subordinates and telling them, you go do this, you go do that, why don't you go and collect this information. This is a lot of exposition that happens, and it's all coming through the police officer, and it's almost like we are watching a film that is centered on the antagonist, where he is doing everything, he is the mastermind, he is the one orchestrating every single piece of the puzzle, and then the supposed protagonist played by the police officers are mere spectators, and that is never good for investigative thriller, and that is not good for Aryan either. And even the finale where there is a conversation about like who should we treat as our heroes, those are all, the social messaging are all very, very let's just say are afterthoughts, and they don't really land well because the journey to that point wasn't very satisfying. Suddenly, if you're turning back and telling me that we are doing a lot of things wrong as a society, I would say yes. But is that the message that I would want to take away from Aryan? Probably not. I quite enjoyed the music of Gibran for a while because it doesn't remind you of Rakshasan. Again, there is no comparison here, but it gives you the urgency of the narrative. It tells you that a lot of things are happening. It tells you that it's happening in breakneck pace because it's a span of 6 days, 6 hours, and 6 deaths, and it's telling you a lot of things happening in very, 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 very fast. but the music is what tells you, because the narrative doesn't really reflect that speed. The film tells me the stakes are very high. The film tells me that anything could happen to anybody, but I didn't really feel it, mainly because everything feels too inorganic. Everything doesn't, even the investigation part doesn't feel very meshed together. It feels very disjointed. It feels very, it's like almost like one random idea told by somebody has found its way into the film, and even if it doesn't make sense to the overall arc of the film, it's just there because someone had a bright idea. What we are left with is a very rushed investigation that, I don't know, doesn't feel like we end up cheering for the right side. On that note, thank you very much for joining Cinema Express. If you like this review, please like, share and subscribe to Cinema Express, and do let us know what you thought of the film and the review. And until we meet in the next episode, this is your friendly neighborhood critic, Avinash Ramachandran, signing off. Tata!